Okay, so the good, the bad, and the things I think could have been done better with this nerf. I'm going to get into that right now. First, we have the Corrupt Elementalist. That is a good job, Blizzard. Yay, you got it. This nerf was really good. I think that it slows down the Dragon's Pact combo because you can't coin this out turn 4 and then play Dragon's Pact turn 5. It also slows down Galakrond a little bit because you can't play this turn 5 and then Kronk's turn 6 and Galakrond turn 7 anymore, which is nice. And it just slows down the deck as a whole, and it was already probably a 6-cost card to begin with. Like a 3/3 that summoned 4/2 in stats is a 7/5 for 5 with 4 attack of it being rushed. Like, that was too strong, but a 6-mana card, a little more balanced. Next, you have Sludge Slurper. Sludge Slurper is, in my opinion, an okay card to begin with. This nerf is more of quality of a life. It means it can't trade up as easily anymore, which is nice. And it doesn't apply as much early game pressure, so overall, not really needed change, but, you know, a nice one nonetheless. Next is the Faceless Corruptor. Faceless Corruptor being 4 attack I think is nice, but if it's still not enough later on, I think lowering its health to 3 would be beneficial. Because 3 attack is, I think, the most common attack in the game, which means that they won't be able to value trade into things as easily and then leave board pressure on the board by having 5 1s left or now 4 1s left. I think having them be 3 attack would mean that if they do want to keep the board pressure, they're going to have to trade into less impactful minions, which I think would be very good for the card as a whole. Because I think that it should be used more as a control tactic to deal with the board rather than deal with the board and then also leave you with a decent amount of board presence. That's just my thoughts. Then the next thing is Mogu Flesh Shaper being 9 mana. It's actually a buff. The issue is never the fact that you get to play it for free, although it was a slight issue. Now, oh darn, you get to play it for 2 and rush into a minion and kill it and then mutate it. And now it is a 10 mana, which is a much better pool when you mutate it. So, things I think could have been done better. Flesh Shaper. Flesh Shaper could have been changed in one of 2 ways. One, lowering its health. Lowering its health I think could have been better. Actually, there are 3 ways. One way would have been weird. But anyway, lowering its health is the first way. I think that if you did that, that means, again, same as the Faceless Corruptor, you wouldn't be able to value trade into 3/3s or 3 attack minions as easily, which means you wouldn't be able to hit as value targets. But it should still keep like the rush and stuff because it was going to be used and have the flavor of something like a mind control tech. If they have a wide board, this is a way to deal with it. And then you could also mutate it to gain some pressure if you need to as well. But I don't think it was ever thought of as a card that could be a massive board swing into a huge amount of extra board presence. Like, I don't think they really thought of, they being Blizzard, thought of how heavily this could be abused. The next thing is lowering its cost for every 2 minions on the board, which would definitely help a lot. Like, they'd need wider boards to actually get the value out of it, and keep it at 7 mana, so also it has a weaker pool in total of cards that it can mutate into. And then the last one, which I think is the best, is changing the entire mana cost as a whole, like the entire mechanic. Now let me explain 2 reasons why I think this works. 1, okay, when you play a Sea Giant for 1 mana in Zoolock with a Magic Carpet on the board, it is a 1 mana card when it enters the battlefield, which means that it should remain a 1 mana card. Because if it's 1 mana when it comes in to get the 1 attack and rush, it should be 1 attack, or it should be a 1 mana card while it remains on the board. I just feel like that would stay consistent rather than playing it. As it enters its 1, it gets whatever effects, and then it immediately becomes a 10-drop right after. I feel like that's inconsistent. Then the other 2 things are their 2 side quests that have you play like 6 and 10 mana in spells or minions, and if those things have been reduced in cost, then they enter as the reduced cost, but then they go back to your hand as the normal cost if they're returned to your hand, or they like go into the board, and after the initial play, they once again become their original cost, which I think is an issue. I think that if it enters as a certain cost, it should be that certain cost, unless it's returned to hand, in which case it just reverts back to what it was, which they already do. So I feel like that would be something that would help the Flesh Shaper, because it would mean that it's not going to be as abusable in Standard with Mutate. Conjurer's Calling won't be as abusable, and when they nerfed Conjurer's Calling, I liked it, but I never really thought that was the issue. I always thought the issue was being able to get the Mountain Giant out for really cheap, and then that was the thing being abused. It's like the whole issue that I had with Wild Growth back in the day. I don't think that Wild Growth was the issue, but they targeted that card. I think it's the other cards around it that allowed for that particular card to be abused. And I think the same thing is happening now with the whole evolve mechanic. I don't think the evolve card itself needs to be nerfed. I think what needs to be nerfed is the mechanic that's being abused. So that's just my 2 cents. You can agree or disagree. I just think that Mugu Flesh Shaper has been a massive problem for like a year now and needs to be changed. Next thing is the Dragon's Pack. I think Dragon's Pack should be changed in one of 3 ways. 1, make it harder to get the invoke off. Make it like you need 3 invokes for it to be buffed, just so it's a little less consistent. 2, make it 1 more mana, because back in the Cthulhu days, there was a 6 mana card, 4/6 taunt, that if Cthulhu had 10 or more attack, you make another 4/6 taunt. This deck is easier to pull off, because you only need to buff 2 times, rather than upgrade Cthulhu 4 times. It's easier to pull off, it's cheaper, and the stats are better. So, if you increase the mana cost a little bit, and make it a 5/6, 2 5/6s on turn 6, it would be, in my opinion, more balanced. It would be along the lines of that, but still better due to power creep, which I think is a great direction to go with this card. Then the last one is making Overload, so that way it hurts a future play. Like if you play this, it gets punished. And I think this would work in a way where you don't overload it if it's not upgraded, but if it is upgraded, then you would overload it. And I think that that would be a great way to balance the card, because if you do play it at a lower value, you don't get hurt later on. So it doesn't feel bad to play if you need to play it as like a game saver. But if you play it as like a tempo producing massive board swing, you do get punished a little bit, which I think would be phenomenal. The next 2 things are focused primarily on Galakrond, which when I say all of these things, I don't want them to do all of them. I want them to do maybe a couple so it doesn't absolutely murder the class and deck as a whole. Because I think the deck is a cool idea, and I think that Galakrond Shaman should exist. I just think that there are a lot of abusable things that are taken advantage of right now. So anyway, the other things are making the invoke instead of 2 1s, 1 2s. I think that that's a bit of a strong nerf. Maybe too strong. I want to hear you guys' thoughts about this one in the comments. But being able to trade up into so many minions with 2/1 rushes is so incredibly strong. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, it just means that if you're ever playing an even slightly aggressive game, you should think, okay, the weakness of this deck should be they're not able to control the board super well because they're going for invoke synergies to get value later in the game. They shouldn't also have 2/1 rushes that can kill pretty much any early game minion that you play. I think a 1/2 would be a lot better, and give it a clear weakness that you can exploit while still keeping the late game really strong. The other thing is making them the giant minions 6/6s. I know all of the other ones double each time. It goes 1 2 4. But this one is just so strong, and since you can double activate it with the quest and then activate it again with Shutterwalk, depending on what decks you're running, you can get these minions upwards of 6 times, which is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. And if it was a little bit weaker, like 6/6s, it wouldn't be as devastating in my opinion. But again, that one's focusing primarily on a singular card, which again I think is an issue. Like I said, I think that targeting the Wild Growth or targeting Conjurer's Calling or targeting specifically Galakrond is an issue, because that's not the thing that's necessarily breaking the deck. The breaking of the deck is the mechanics being abused that allow for this to be super strong. Like so here's an example of why I think that single card nerfs could be good though. Like Dr. Boom, targeting that was the card that made the control warrior deck very, very hard to beat once it got to a certain point. So increasing its mana cost and nerfing that specific card was good because nothing else was really being abused up until that point. It was after playing that card, everything getting a buff that was the issue. With this one, it's the fact that it has a really, really good early and mid game because of the invokes and the Dragon's Pack, and Galakrond itself was not really an issue. So if this is the way that they go, I'll be a little disappointed, but at least it's targeting the deck a little bit more in a way that'll be impactful. What they did this time was absolutely useless, and I'm kind of disappointed that it's the way that they went, but I mean, at least it's something. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys like discuss this a little bit, and if you agree, disagree, I'd love to talk all about it, because I love talking about potential balance changes and stuff like this. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and see ya.